All right, good morning. Good morning. It is Lord's Day morning, and we are enjoying this beautiful weather. If you hear some clanging about, we're having one of the blinds shut because it's actually too bright, too sunny for me, and to get like sun right in the eyes. Thank you. Uh, so that's what the clanging's about. Also, if you're noticing that the resolution or whatever is not the dazzling 4K or whatever we had before on there, it's because I left the portable camera hookup for the computer at home. So we're using the camera that's on the laptop. So it might be beneficial to you at home so you're not seeing this face in high def because that's probably not what you want to see. But anyways, we are in John chapter, I believe 6. This says 5 and 6, but I believe we finished 5, and so we're going to go into 6, and let's just go ahead and jump right on in. Uh, Again, I bring this up, some of the uniquenesses of John that is different from the other Gospels, and his use of sevens, the number 7, things happen in order of 7. And we have 2 of these pre-crucifixion miracles that happen in chapter 6. The feeding of the 5,000 and walking on the water. So we're gonna hit a couple of those in this chapter. So John chapter 6, verses 1 through 14. And I have up here also Psalms chapter 23, verses 1 and 2. And the Psalm of David, Psalm 23, is a pretty famous psalm. It's often used at funerals, and it's this idea of having rest and peace with the Lord, but it's not only to be used in funerals, because I believe that we have that rest and that peace in the Lord, and so while you're living, you can still have that. And I think that it's really interesting to compare Psalms 23, specifically verses 1 and 2, which is a psalm of the chief shepherd, okay? The psalm of the Lord. And compare that to what we have here transpiring in John chapter 6. So let's go ahead and read John chapter 6, verses 1 through 14. After these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. Then a great multitude followed him because they saw his signs which he performed on those who were deceased. And Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. Now the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was near. Then Jesus lifted up his eyes, and seeing a great multitude coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread, that these may eat?" But this he said to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may have a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, there is a lad here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. But what are they among so many? Then Jesus said, make the people sit down. Now there was much grass in this place. So the men sat down in number about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to the disciples, and the disciples to those sitting down, and likewise the fish, as much as they wanted. So when they were filled, he said to his disciples, gather up the fragments that remain, so that nothing is lost. Therefore they gathered them up, and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the 5 barley loaves, which were left over by those who had eaten. Then those men, when they had seen the sign that Jesus did, said, this is truly the prophet who is to come into the world. So again, we see here the significance on the signs in talking about that this is the Christ. Go ahead.
So I have a question. When it says because they saw his signs which he performed on those who were deceased,
No, or diseased. I said deceased. Diseased.
Yes.
I said deceased. Thank you for catching that. Not deceased. Diseased.
Yes.
The healing. The healing of the infirm. Yeah, I thank you for pointing that out to me. I said deceased. It's D-I-S, diseased. Yeah, yeah. D-I-S-E-A-S-E-D. I said deceased. But the diseased. And remember, the issue they have with Jesus stems from him healing a paralytic on the Sabbath. And so he's doing some miraculous deeds on the diseased. And he will do some on the deceased as well, too. That comes later. But anyway, so we have here these signs which he's doing is indicative of at least a person sent from God. Okay, at least, bare minimum. If I could walk up and down the city streets of Louisville and simply speak the words, "You are healed," and individuals that are on the street corners, that are drug addicted, that are infirmed, that are in wheelchairs, that are unable to speak, are immediately relieved of that burden. And that's taken away from them. And think about that. Okay, in our present day, we have seen the drug addicted on our city streets. And for those in the home audience, if you look up drug addiction in America, you might find some videos of the fentanyl crisis. And so you would see cities like Philadelphia, which is named after brotherly love, and you would see people walking with go cams or other different recorders, and you see people slumped over like this, just stuck there. You know, the Walking Dead is what they would call them, or they just, or they're passed out all different kinds of conditions on the pavement. And our hearts bleed for them, and we want to help them. But the problem is they're a slave to their addiction. Their brains have literally been broken. You know, they're unable to realize and process the situation which they're in. And everything that you could offer them, they would exchange it all. It's like the question asked by Jesus, what would you give in exchange for your soul? They would exchange it all for drugs. They give up family, they give up possessions, they give up everything. They're a slave to it. So if I was able to walk out there and take a person that was a slave to heroin or morphine or fentanyl or oxy or anything else, and I was able to just immediately free them of that, and they had no addiction anymore, I would imagine that these people would be entirely grateful for me and want to follow me to the ends of the earth for freeing them. And so, and again, these same people that were lamed, that were blind, these people now, Christ has a following. These people are ingratiated, indebted to him, and they love him. And they're speaking about the things that he did. So even if they're not following him, they're saying there is a man, a Galilean, a Nazarite, there's this carpenter, there's this Jew, there's this person out there that healed me. And so that is important because these things are being cataloged, are being recorded in the scripture in John that says these things were written. He did many other things, but these things were written that you may believe. The gospel writer of John, again, John being the last of the gospels, to a group of people that are coming to the faith through secondhand knowledge. They're not, it's not, a lot of these people are not firsthand knowledge. They didn't witness the miracles of the cross. So they're having to believe in the miracles of Christ. And they're like, hey, you go check it out. You ask and you see, and these people that are still living will tell you. But anyway, so these are the things that he's doing, the power that he has. Now, I highlighted two things in blue. Again, these are indicative of deity. So again, what I was saying is his miraculous power, at least he's sent by God. But the things that he's doing are also only indicative of God. The first part there, where it says to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. That's omniscient. He knows what people are going to do. He knows all things. He knows the heart of a man. He knows what's going to happen in the future because he knows all things. And in the second one, this look, it's kind of comical. They're like, we have 200 denarii. These people are poor. And again, it again boggles my mind on what Judas was willing to sell out the Lord for. It's such a small amount. And it's important to acknowledge that because whatever you exchange your soul for, whatever you exchange the Lord for, no matter what it is, it's Judas money. It's a small amount. Oh, I'm gonna take Sunday off from the Lord so I can go to the big game. I am going to give up following Christ so I can pursue my education and my work aspirations or my political aspirations, and Christianity is just not conducive for that. Whatever you exchange, I don't care how wealthy you become. You become the Zuckerberg, or you become the what's the Elon Musk. You know, you become one of these individuals. You exchange the Lord for, 30 pieces of silver. It's nothing. And so we see the poverty that they have, this storage box of money that Judas was stealing from. They're like, I've got 200 denarii for 13 people, 12 disciples and Christ, and whoever else might be with them, because we know that there were more people at different times when he sent out the 70. So imagine 200 denarii for 70 plus people. That's nothing. You know, a day's labor was a denarii. You know, and so these people are entirely impoverished. And they're like, we've got 200 denarii. How are we going to feed these people? Uh, or Peter, he's like, yeah, we've got this lad here. But it's not like saying, hey, we can do something with this. It's pointing out the absurdity of taking care of these individuals with such a few sparse amount. And so, anyways, these individuals pointing this out, but they were able to eat to their fill. Everybody ate to their fill. The 5,000, that's a lot of people. Have you ever fed? Let's just say you fed 40 people. If you were responsible for feeding 40 people, and I'm not talking about finger food. I'm talking about you had to feed them to fill. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of effort. Go ahead.
Okay, we speak of the 5,000 that were men. There was also women and children present too, so it was actually more than 5,000
That's a great point.
because women and children were not counted at that time.
That's a great point. When they counted, and now look, I understand people are like, well, why did they count women and children? The counts at this time for the governments were only for war fighting men, or for people that paid in taxes. Because everything, you gotta think, everything was for taxation and war. Okay, that's what the surveys were done for. And women didn't own property, they didn't have jobs, they didn't pay taxes, and neither did small children. And they weren't able to be called up for war. So that's why they weren't counted. But you're absolutely right. So you're talking what? Double that at least?
At least.
So 10,000 people?
That's assuming all the men were married.
Yeah, or had kids. You know, some of the women, the widows, maybe had kids, but they didn't have husbands. So who knows? But let's just say that that's 8 to 10,000 now. And children are picky. I could imagine trying to get my kids to fill up on fish. That would be difficult. But that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people to feed.
What I find interesting is that the people that questioned him, they saw miracles. They saw it happen. And I hate to like poo-poo on them.
Yeah.
To be like, you were there. I don't understand what the disconnect is. You saw it happen before. Why are you just being so stupid right now? But then I think of myself, I'm like, yeah, that worked before, but is it gonna work now kind of thing?
Yeah.
So if I want to think that they're stupid, but in another way, they're just absolutely human.
Go ahead, Carrie. You got your hand up?
There's kind of a mental disconnect because they haven't there for when wine was made out of blood.
Yeah.
It's like they know that he can heal diseases,
Mm-hmm.
but that's they haven't seen him be. They haven't they assume him to be a prophet, but like not this all powerful. They don't see him as God, this all powerful being that could create everything. I mean, albeit you had other prophets do the same thing. You had the jar of was it manna or like flour?
Yeah, flour.
That never ran out.
Yeah.
But still, there's a mental disconnect there.
And I'll go on both of those comments. Excellent, because here's the thing. We still do that today.
Absolutely, that's what I'm saying. I can't poo-poo on them because we do that too now.
God's been with me in the past, or this thing's worked out in the past. But today,
It's not gonna work out.
what about tomorrow? And the same thing, we come across these things, especially, look, I've gone through this, but I haven't gone through that. And they might have, you said that they saw him heal diseases. Okay, disease, that's one thing. But this is feeding 5,000 plus people.
Food is totally something else. This was one person, this is 10,000 people.
And so we struggle with that, right? And when we just have to have faith
Which is much easier said.
that God says it's going to work out, and yet we just need to trust that it will.
Also, a lot of the people was there either out of curiosity, because they want to see what this man would do next, or they were attending what I would call a food fest.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, and you find that they do start following him for the food, for the miracles. You know, they want to see something. And so there's this kind of like, there is this belief that things will happen. But that belief in that things are going to happen doesn't transcribe into belief and obedience.
They look at him more as a sorcerer than they did
Yeah.
as the Son of God.
Yeah. And so, you know, all these things are absolutely valid, and we see this in ourselves today. That God says, do this thing. And I'm like, okay, I'm sitting there a little bit getting personal or whatever like that, but I'm at Eastland, and I hear about the tragedy that happens here, you know, with Abel and his passing. And I know that you all are struggling. And, you know, from, you know, knowing that Ted Barber's here. And I'm like, I know I can help. But I've got so much going on. And I just don't know where I'm going to find the time. And it's like, how am I going to find the time? But I know I can help. And at the same time, I'm like, my kids are here and they're with other kids at Eastland. And it's just like, how are things going to work out? And I had no idea how they were going to work out. I didn't. But I said, I can do something. And so I did. And we were going, because I was trying to give you all space and time to find somebody. And so I was working here and also attending there, so I'm doing both, and I'm going to all these different services. And it's just like, and I'm like, I can do this. And I make the plunge and jump. But I didn't know how it was going to work out. And I still see this today. I'm like, I've got assignments, you know, up to my eyeballs, and I just don't know where I'm going to find the time. And then I have a professor cancel that class, or I have the assignment extended. I'm going to get real personal here. And when I was being medically retired from the Army, and I was going to be put out, I was going to be drawing 100%, but that only transcribes to basically 50% of your pay, and your high 3, which was going to be paid as an E5 sergeant. And we had debt. We incurred debt from me going to Iraq. We incurred debt from me being in the WTU. And we just had no idea how we were going to make a living, cutting my pay by half. And actually more than that, because you lose BAH. So it was cutting my pay by like 75%. And so we were going to have to file for the VA, and it took over a year to get everything through the VA, and they still didn't give me everything. And we were just like, we're going to be homeless again, but this time with babies. And then we got a phone call. Well, actually, no, we got an alert that we had a whole bunch of money put in our account, And my wife freaks out. We were at some sort of clinic. I can't even remember. It was in the VA. I was really hazy back then because of my traumatic brain injury. But my wife goes into a panic and she looks like she's going to have a heart attack, and she's calling the bank and she wants to know how all this money got into our bank. And she's telling them that something happened, it's a fraud, but what? And the bank says, oh, that's from the Department of Defense. And it's from Traumatic Servicemen Group Life Insurance, TSGLI. And we're like, what? We didn't file for that. It was filed for us because of my combat wounds. And that was enough money to pay off our debts. And so, we were able to, with just the house payment, make a living and survive until the VA kicked in. We saw no way. Now, I'm not saying that this is miraculous, but I'm saying it's providential. And we can all see these providential things happen in our lives, but we just don't think we can do it another second. And we're sitting there, we're praying, and we have no idea how this is going to resolve. And then it resolves. And so that's the idea here of having the faith that even though you haven't seen this miracle yet, you haven't seen this providence play out, but you serve a God who can do anything. He can raise the dead. He can walk on water. He can turn water to wine. He can feed the 5,000. There's everything that he can do. He created everything into existence. And so you can have faith in this as well. Anyway, so we kind of went off a little bit. That's good. Good discussion. So anyways, you see up here, I've got these listed by numbers in here, and they're different colors. And so this is to indicate what we're going to read here in the Psalm. So we have the Sea of Galilee, which is 4. We have left over by those who are eaten at 1. So in order, they're the 1, the 2, and the 3, and the 4 are in the order in which they happen in the Psalms. And so let's open these up right here. So in the Psalms, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And again, this is the amount that was left over, 12 baskets with fragments of the 5 barley loaves. So they ate to their fill, and then there was more left over than when it began. I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. So it makes me to lie down in the green pastures. Make the people sit down. The chief shepherd. Because there was much grass in the place. And again, he was empathetic for these people. It was pointed out that these people might have just been following for any reason. There was a numerous amount of reasons why people were following. But it didn't matter why they were following them. He saw that they were there and he had compassion on them. And this was the perfect place. This was the place that they could lay down in security and comfort. And so he made them lay down. And he was going to feed his flock. And then, so in 4th here, he leads me beside still waters. Now he went over to the Sea of Galilee, and the Sea of Galilee isn't always still. And it's deep. And not deep, but it's not what you would typically bring sheep in. But I just want you to point out here, Mark chapter 4, verse 39, and he arose, rebuked the wind, and said to the sea, peace be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. So we see there by a body of water, and we know that he can calm the waters. And so again, this lines up. And again, John is writing, and his goal and focus is on 2 things. Seeing Jesus as God and seeing Jesus as a man. And when we move to this next section in John, you're not going to have a whole lot of omnipresence, omnipotent, omniscient. You're going to have John is going to be displaying Jesus as the man. And he's going to be reasoning and arguing in the scriptures. But in here we can see this kind of parallel of the chief shepherd, which is speaking about Christ. Let's not get that lost. Psalms 23 is about Christ. And yet we see him in the flesh on display doing the things that the chief shepherd is talked about doing. Anybody see that parallel? Get that? All right, so let's jump to the next section here. Jesus walking on the sea. Again, this is another one of these miracles that we see here in verse 15. Therefore, when Jesus perceived that they were about to come and take him by force and make him king, he departed again to the mountain by himself alone. Now, this is again interesting. I put this in here and I bring this up that there were periods of time that people were going to force him to be their king. That is how powerful these miracles were in the importance to these individuals. But it wasn't his time. And you can see this as a tremendous temptation. You can see this as a tremendous temptation as well. And had this conversation with my wife just this past week. And just I think it was the other day. And we don't have a whole lot of depiction of the young Christ, of the young man of Christ. We see him as an infant, we see him as a young child, and then we don't see him again until he's in his 30s. But we don't need to know what transpired because he did not sin and he lived a perfect life and he lived the life that we all would live. And I pointed it out to her the other day. It mirrors that of God. Infancy, creation of the world. Adolescence, we have the law given through Moses, which was to be our schoolmaster to bring us to Christ. And even in from the last minor prophet to Christ coming on the scene, you have a 400-year window of silence. And so we have confidence and faith that God created everything, God has a plan, and just because it's silent, like people complain today, where is the Christ? Where is God? Everything's been exactly the same since always, and so there is no God. The silence does not mean that there's a God, but means that God is working. And we can see that as well in the silence of the scriptures on Christ and his life. It mirrors the scriptures. And now there's a silence since he's gone, but we know he is behind the scenes. But anyways, but we can see this as a temptation for him because he wants to lead his people. He wants to do good for his people. And being king would allow him to do that, but that wasn't the way. That wasn't the way in which he would do it. And so we can see this kind of also goes against the premillennialism, that Christ was this failed king, that the people rejected him, and ultimately they did. At the end, they rejected him when he came into Jerusalem. But if he wanted to be king, there were opportunities to make it happen. And again, read his depiction in Revelation and tell me that he could not have toppled Rome. He's going to topple the entire world. If he wanted to be a king, he could have ruled as a king. But he didn't want to do things that way because it wasn't the plan. The plan was for him to die. It was necessary. But he had opportunities. So let's just point that out. Verse 16. Now when evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, got into the boat, and went over the sea toward Capernaum. And it was already dark, and Jesus had not come to them. Then the sea arose because a great wind was blowing. So when they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, and they saw Jesus walking on the sea and drawing near the boat, and they were afraid. But he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." Then they willingly received him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land where they were going. I didn't put in here omnipotent, but that should also be in there as well, the immediacy. Again, they're on the sea, it's at night, great wind is blowing, they're 3 or 4 miles out, I believe, depending on where you're at, it could be up to 12 miles across. So this is a long walk, 3 or 4 miles walk out on the water. But why he did that, not just immediately make himself in the boat, I don't know. Maybe he wanted some time to think. Maybe he wanted them to get out to where they were at and start to go, oh my goodness, we're out in the dark water and it's windy. I don't know. We do know that sometimes he wanted some time alone. So interesting, but he's walking out there and he's walking on the sea and they were afraid. They were afraid probably because it's dark, afraid because of the wind, but also afraid because there's this thing, and we see in other places they think it's a ghost. But he's walking on water, they're afraid, but then when he gets into the boat, immediately the boat was where it was supposed to be. So that's omnipotent, able to transport this boat to wherever. So and again, that's what he did. So again, we see this as a divine miracle in 2, immediately transporting the boat across the sea. Here we are, John 6:22 through 29. Did anybody have any questions about that previous one? Kind of self-explanatory. On the following day, when the people who were standing on the other side of the sea saw that there was no other boat there except that one which his disciples had entered. And again, they're kind of like, hey, wait a minute, you've left without Jesus, and now you got Jesus, and he's in the same boat. How did this happen? And that Jesus had not entered the boat with his disciples, but his disciples had gone away alone. However, other boats came from Tiberias near the place where they ate bread, after the Lord had given thanks. When the people therefore saw that Jesus was not there, nor his disciples, they also got into boats and came to Capernaum seeking Jesus. And when they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, Rabbi, when did you come here? Then Jesus answered and said to them, Most assuredly I say to you, you seek me not because you saw the signs, this is what Mike was talking about, but because you ate the loaves and were filled. Do not labor for the food which perishes, but for the food which endures to everlasting life, which the Son of Man will give you, because God the Father has set his seal upon him. And they said to him, What shall we do that we may work the works of God? And Jesus answered and said to him, This is the work of God, that you believe on him whom he sent. Now this last 2 verses here, 28 and 29, are very important. And I want you to come to these verses if you're ever in a discussion with a person about faith isn't a work. And they'll say, faith only saves. And then I always do this, I like it's funny. So you believe in work salvation. No. That's just it. You don't have to do any work. You just have to believe. And so I'm like, so faith isn't a work? They're like, no, it's not. Okay, so you believe Jesus, right? Absolutely. Well, let's read what Jesus says. Jesus says it's a work. But the important thing here, it's a work of God. God is working in you, building your faith. God is strengthening you in your resolve with the Word. It's His work. You didn't come up on it your own. If you did, if you were born and immediately left in a cave and somehow you survived and you had no interaction with mankind whatsoever and you were just looking up at the sky and you were looking at creation and you were just thinking about the way things should be, and you're like, okay, there's this God, his name is Jehovah or Yahweh, and he decided to create everything, and he developed a law so we would know what sin is, and then he sent his son to die for us, and his name would be Jesus, and this is okay, now it's on you. You did the work. But you didn't do, it's just like believing, okay, I know I'm not a numbers guy, I'm not a math guy, but it's just like believing math. Okay, 2 + 2 = 4. Okay? It's not your work to believe that. It's already been proven. It's already done. You see it. Here's the evidences. I can show you this plus that, 1 + 2, 1 + 1 = 2. Okay, and then add 2 more, you got 4. That's how we all learn things, right? As kids, they put things in blocks, and you see, okay, object permanence. That is just you accepting a fact. Okay, it's not you doing anything other than that. In the same way the scripture works. Believing it is a work of God. And John chapter 6 talks about that. So if you don't believe in no work salvation, well then you would also must believe that you don't have to believe. And I've never found anybody that professes Christianity that doesn't say that belief is essential. And if you get them to believe that this is a work of God, and you must do this to be saved, and you also go to Colossians chapter 2, and you believe that you must be circumcised with the circumcision without hands, Christ's circumcision, and you see that parallel, that is baptism, and you look at Mark 16:16, and you say, here, both of these things are required. He that believeth and is baptized will be saved. Oh, you must do both works of God. You must do all the works of God. Okay? It works hand in hand. And so this is a really good passage to go to. So John 6. Remember John 6 as your proof text to go to somebody if you're talking to them about faith-only settings. And then also you can reference it to James chapter 2. Okay? And because if they say, well, okay, you have to do this work of God, but not any of the other works. Well, you go to James chapter 2, you go say, faith only does not save. Because unless that faith also has you to do the other works of God, to confess with your mouth, okay, or to repent of your sins, to confess with your mouth, and to be baptized, you're not going to be saved. All these things are required. So, mark this down in your Bibles. In the back of your Bible, if you got that nice blank page right there, you can write John 6, 28 and 29. Okay? You can write Mark 16:16, and you can write James 2. Okay? And these passages of Scripture you look at together, you talk about together to totally refute faith only. Okay? Because what they'll do is they'll go to Ephesians, and they'll say it's not of works, but a gift of God. They'll say grace. Absolutely. But it's talking about the works of man and keeping the law for salvation. And that's not how that works. The work is done by Christ. All of these works are done by Christ, not by you. You're not going to be saved by giving alms. Okay? You're not going to be saved by offering sacrifices. That's not how that works. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about here. So again, they were confused. They're about how Jesus got there alone, but they followed him for the bread. They followed him for the bread service. Jesus knew who was who, but he was still kind to everyone, and he still provided for everyone regardless. And then we come down here, because God the Father has set his seal on him. This word seal comes from the Greek number 4972, sphragizo, sphragizo. Its definition literally to seal something. Usage is a seal, to set a seal upon. Properly to seal or affix with a signet ring or other instrument to stamp, i.e. a roller or a seal, and to attest ownership, authorizing, vindicating what is sealed. Okay? It signifies ownership and the full security carried by the backing or full authority of the owner. Sealing in the ancient world served as a legal signature which guaranteed the promise of the contents of what was sealed. I find this fascinating for a couple different reasons. One, God is setting his seal, allowing him to do these miracles, saying, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. I'm giving you this full backing. I'm giving you the full confidence and assurance of the promise. And then we break the seal. We opened it up. And it kind of goes along the lines that we wanted to see what was inside, right? This letter was sealed. It was sent to us in love. We're promising it. And we opened it up and looked inside. And what did we find? Love. The promise of love. And he kept his promise. Up until this point, up until his death on the cross, it was a promise. But we're living in post-promise. We're living on delivered promise. It was delivered. We don't have to doubt whether God loves us. We don't have to doubt whether or not he wants to save us. We don't have to doubt that. We know that because he died on the cross for us. So this love letter was sent to us in the flesh of Christ, and we broke it. We broke the seal. We opened him up on the cross and outpoured his blood for us. I was reading that and I was thinking about that. and I was like, set a seal upon us. And this, we're going to talk about, it's interesting, kind of feeds the 5,000. And then he says, he takes that and goes from that you're going to eat my flesh and you're going to drink my blood. And that's going to be the seal that you're going to have of my love for you. That's going to be the reminder. So we're going to touch that next week. I think we had some really good discussions on that. I think that was pretty cool. I like, if you don't get this about it, I like getting into the weeds. I like talking about it, the similarities and stuff. And I think that it's beautiful when we read this way. And I appreciate your attendance. So we're going to attention to that. And we're going to pick right up here. We're going to finish chapter 6. We're going to be talking about the first I am statement. I am the bread of life. Again, thank you. And we're going to end there.